Welcome to Racers Trackside Report from the 104th Indianapolis 500. Robin Miller, you just watched Rahal Letterman Lanigan's Takuma Sato become the Indy 500's newest two-time winner. We also saw Honda Power dominate the day. Tell us about the big themes jumping out here at a conclusion of a race that was supposed to happen about 3 months ago.
Well, Marshall, I just thought we'd be interviewing Scott Dixon about his second victory. I mean, you watch that race and you're just thinking he leads the most laps. He's got the most dominant car. Their pit stops are flawless. And yet he didn't win the race because Takuma Sato looked like he was the fastest guy at the end of the race, and he was. He was running laps at 221 miles an hour at the end of the race. And I thought Dixie was just kind of playing it smart, just kind of sitting behind him. And then all of a sudden, there's 15 laps to go. Then there's 10. And suddenly he's not gaining on him. And Graham Rahal's gaining on Dixon. So hell of a day for Rahal Letterman Lanigan. Hell of a day for Sato. I think Dixie, he takes things in stride pretty well, Marshall. But this has just got to. You talk about a gut shot. I mean, he even said in the short interview I saw, he said, it's going to be tough to get over this one because you seldom have a car like he probably had all day and do whatever he wants to do and controls the pace of the race. And it doesn't matter what it is, traffic or whatever it was, he could handle it. But a lot of crashes, a pretty good race. I mean, I don't like – we went back to the old Fontana thing, didn't we, with the Hanford device where nobody wanted to lead. And, you take turn. Rossi and Dixon were trading the lead every lap. That's kind of hokey, but you got to do it to play the game. But at the end, it was going to be a hell of a finish, and we ended up finishing under yellow.
We had 111 laps, Robin, that Dixon spent up front. He had easy speed for the vast majority of the day, 160, 170 laps. There was definitely something different in that final sprint to the checkered flag where not only did Takuma get out in front, but there's no real reason for Scott to really sit behind for anything more than a couple of laps. And yet when it came time for him to respond, he had one good run. Takuma closed the door hard. And from there, Dixon had no answer. So to your point, brutal to be the person everyone's picking to win. And if it was the 170 laps of Indy, boy, that guy'd be a champion. But Takuma earned it. I mean, he didn't steal it. There was no trickery. This is someone who went out and got it on pure pace there, Robin. Tell us about the finish. We don't like to have race control enter into the conversation too much. We had both a Rossi pit lane penalty, which really tanked his day. And then we had poor Spencer Pigot laid out on the concrete after his big crash. No decision to go to a red flag. Takuma was going to win whether there was or wasn't a red flag. So I don't think the order would have changed, but we had that to talk about as well.
Well, I talked to Kyle Novak a little while ago, and he said the number one thing was it was going to take him at least an hour to repair the attenuator because it's destroyed. And I think that was probably the biggest concern was you're not going to sit around for another hour. You got NBC national TV. So I think both of those things probably contributed to the fact. And there was kind of an unwritten rule a few years ago, Marshall. I think when Bo Barfield was the race director, if it was 5 to 10 laps to go in the race, or maybe 7 to 10, they'd red flag it like they did here in 2014. But inside of 5 laps or less, they wouldn't. I mean, I don't think that's in the rule book. I just think that was kind of an unwritten rule. So, Dixie said, man, I wish we could have restarted that race with 3 laps to go because you never know. I mean, he was the one guy we see all these restarts for the last few years here. And if you're running first, you're toast. He was the one guy all day. Nobody passed him on restarts. So he was thinking he had a pretty good chance at Sato, and I think Graham thought he had a pretty good chance at both of them.
So it's probably just a dumb thought of mine, but I figure if we could wait 3 months to get the Indy 500 in, even if it takes a while to get the attenuator in front of pit lane up and running, just for the sake of all the fans who waited, nothing's been normal this year. I know it's a really easy thing to say. I'm not saying it's correct, but that's where my mind went of like, come on, man. If we waited this long, let's at least give folks a proper finish. But again, I don't think anyone was getting past Takuma Sato. One quick final note on Sato here before we talk about Chevy, Penske, Pato Award. You and I spoke about who we thought were going to win, right? We talked about Dixon, we talked about Rossi, and we talked about a lot of people. We never talked about Takuma Sato, man. I mean, you want to talk about just blind idiots. Here's a guy starting right up front, with a beautiful, beautiful vantage point with pole sitter Marco Andretti, who we also said we definitely thought was in with a shot for victory. Andretti Autosport didn't have a great day, which we'll speak about, but here's the guy right up front, starting third. We never mentioned him once. I love the fact that, once again, at least for me, proof positive, I'm a total idiot.
Well, Sato's amazing. He's getting better as he gets older, and he drove a really smart race today. And he's never afraid to hang it out. We've seen that his whole career. He's never afraid to take a chance and stick his nose in. And when trying to pass Dario years ago to win the race in the last lap, but there is something to be said for the fact that we always talk about guys under the radar. No one talked about Sato all for 2 weeks. They didn't talk about him, even though he did a hell of a job and qualified in the front row in the heat of the day. His time stood up there against all those other guys. But I think, I don't know, there's just him and Eddie Jones have struck a great relationship, have they not? And Derek Davidson, ex-sprint car USAC driver, calling the races, they just seem to click. And I don't know, there's just something about that team that Sato has kind of reinvigorated it. Graham's had another good year. And I just think Sato is an amazing story because here he is. I think he's behind TK. He's the second oldest driver in the starting lineup, 43 or 44. He looks like he's 24, and he's in great shape. So it was 6:45 in the morning when he took the checkered flag, but I think a lot of people were sitting up watching.
So we have, as you mentioned, the great race engineer Eddie Jones, victorious with Taku. Our good pal Michael Cannon, second, his best finish ever, I believe, at the Indy 500. The great squirrel Alan McDonald, working with Graham Rahal, finished third there. Let's talk about some of the speedsters, Robin. We had the Flash, known as Santino Ferrucci, coming hauling the mail. What I think started 18th or 19th, all the way up to 4th. I mean, if this kid could make every race the Indy 500, he'd be the champion. Joseph Newgarden, starting 13th, top driver for Chevrolet. Never looked like he was really in with a shot to win, Robin, but he certainly went forward. Pato Award, moving up from, I think, 14th or 15th place starting position for Air McLaren SP as a rookie. We would assume he'll win Rookie of the Year. There's some folks who, they had a long haul, but boy, they delivered.
I think the thing that's interesting is that everybody thought it would be Dixon and Rossi and Hunter Ray. Those are the three guys you heard a lot. I kept touting Graham, and probably because I bet on him at 30-1. Don't tell anybody. And Sato was under the radar. Newgarden, you thought he would probably run in the top 10, but you just never had the feeling that anybody from Team Penske was going to win the race. Never had that feeling once in 2 weeks. And I tell you what, Pato's like Ferrucci. You have a couple more, give these guys a couple more races here and start them up further. I mean, those guys made some amazing passes today. I don't know if everybody got to see all of them, but the ones I saw, squeezing in between the wall and dive bombing people, they were Rossi vintage passes. And you're right. If they ran this series, it was all over like it used to be, those guys might be right in the thick of the championship. It's just that it's amazing to me when you see all these young guys with so little experience. I mean, Rinus VK and Alex Blue, they had a tough day, but they had some good moves. They had some good moments, and the youth movement was served in qualifying a lot more than it was in the race, which is no surprise. That's the way it usually is around this place. It's about experience, and if you look at the top three, they got quite a few miles around this joint. So I think probably the biggest surprise was just the collapse of the Andretti team. I mean, they started first. Let's see, they started first, fourth, the 1st, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 10th, right? And Marco never led a lap. Was really never competitive. Ryan
Finished
Huntley was
13th. Marco, you want to talk about unlucky number? Not a curse, but yeah, Marco starting on pole, finished 13th.
never led a lap. Never led a lap and was never a contender. I mean, he was in the top 5, but you never got the feeling he was going to be the guy to beat. Hunter Ray had a really good first couple stints. Then I think he had a bad pit stop or something happened. He went to the back, and we never heard from him again.
I heard Hunter Ray went chasing after VK after the race, and I don't mean on track. I mean, yeah, I heard that Mr. Hunter Ray and Mr. VK might have had some words. Not saying that they are anything more than words, but I heard that there was some grumpiness being unfolded by the 2014 INDY500 winner, Robin. So that might have just been another layer of frustration for the Andretti gang, who we thought was primed to just possibly go 1, 2, 3 today, and they're nowhere near.
But I think, you're writing a story about it for the website. But I mean, if Rossi doesn't get that penalty, he's going to be right there. He's going to be right there with Dixon and Graham and Sato at the end. It's going to be a 4-man scramble for the victory, and Rossi's going to be right in the middle of it, don't you think?
I do. Let's also talk about some of the surprises before we talk about some of the crashes. Tony Kanaan looked like things were hovering in and around the top 10. He finished 19th. Power was never really in it. Castro Neves moved forward, but Elio was never really in it. Joseph was about the only Penske driver who truly gave a proper representation of himself. Beyond that, I don't know if there was a bunch of, call it heavyweights, doing things up front that we expected. How does that stand out to you, Robin? The fact that Honda, had, I think, 11 of the top 15 finishers today? That's hard to look past. I know we both spoke. We thought Chevy would be more competitive, other than being off-sequence and Pagenaud being up front leading during that off-sequence portion. Really shocked the bow tie didn't have more.
You're thinking that you're going to get a boost from Ed Carpenter and Connor Daly, both in Chevys. They're going to run good. And VK, Remus has been he hasn't shown any intimidation about being a rookie, so he's going to be another guy to look for with Chevrolet. And then you thought Newgarden, he started far enough up, and he's been pretty good in traffic and practice, and he'd be hanging in there. But I heard some guys talking in the press room this morning about, what do you think Elio's chances are? And I said, he ain't got a chance. There's a 10-car pileup. He ain't going to win the race. He started too far back. He hadn't been that fast. Will hasn't been heard from all week, last 2 weeks, and that's unusual. He was nowhere. Pagenaud was nowhere. The most important part of the race for me, Scott Dixon makes a pit stop under green after the Penske boys cycle through their lead during when they pitted early.
Crazy. It's just crazy.
He makes a pit stop and doesn't lose the lead, and then he laps Penske. I mean, to me, that was game, set, match. That was like, it's over.
How did you not win? Another thing that jumps out, Robin, of the there's always the Mr. Invisible award for big races like this. I don't know who your pick is. Mine is Fernando Alonso. We saw what Pato could do in an Aero McLaren SP Chevy. Even Askew was running strong at points before his crash. I didn't even know Fernando was in the race. And I don't say that in a mean way. The guy's phenomenal. I would have loved to have seen him chopping it up front. Never knew he was there all day.
Yeah, and as great as he is and as good as he was here as a rookie, it's a completely different circumstance. He's the 3rd car in a 3-car team. It's the only race they run all year. Are his pit stops going to be as good as the other 2 guys? And they had good pit stops all day. Just a combination of things. I remember when Montoya ran it here as the 4th car for Penske, he said, I'll never do that again. You have no continuity. Your pit stops aren't nearly as good as everybody else's. And that's what determines the winner. If you look at this thing from any kind of a rational perspective, Roger Penske's pit stops have set the trend forever. And now everybody's just like Roger Penske in the pits. Dixon's pit stops, Marco, he had a 6.2 stop today. when he lapped the Penske car, 6.2. You can't do it. I mean, that's like touching the tires and letting them go. I mean, it was phenomenal, and I think that'll be one. Won't just it'll bother Blair Julian and Mike Hull and all the guys at Guinness, because they know how good, just how great a car they had and what a great chance they had.
Let's talk about rough day for rookies. Robin obviously had not a rookie, but Ed Carpenter getting turfed right off the bat, which is very unfortunate, being a fan favorite. But we're looking at the rookies. Boy, there are a few too many who got out of the race too soon. Oliver Askew in avoidance of Connor Daly's crash. Alex Palou on his own. Renus obviously had problems in the pit, put him a lap down, hit some of his crew members and such. He went from running like P3, P4 to just, kind of off the reservation altogether. And Dalton Kellett, who was never going to terrorize anybody with raw speed, but has kept his nose pretty clean this year. We got a little bit past halfway, I think, and all of a sudden 3 of the 5 rookies were out, leaving Pato to try and represent as best he could, which he did amazingly. And then Renus kind of out of contention. Huge potential for them, as we discussed before the race, but really, maybe we saw some of those rookie stripes showing they were deserved.
Marshall, it's such a cliche, and we all say it and write it, but it only takes. It's all about execution in the pit. If you have one mistake in the pits, it screws up your whole race, or it can, and very seldom do you get away with it. And I felt bad for Rossi because he just did what they told him, go, 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 and he pulled out. I mean, it's not his fault. I mean, Sato was already there. It's not the driver's fault. It's just so that takes him out of the mix. And Hunter Ray had some kind of issue early, and that took him out of the mix. And Renus hit a pit guy and had a drive through. So all the things that can happen to you in a 3-hour race at this joint, it's just got to be, you got to run as clean and as fast and have great pit stops, which is exactly what Scott Dixon did, and he still finished second, which has got to have them scratching their heads.
I think that might be the greatest takeaway, lasting takeaway, as our cat Rosie walks by. How did Dixie not win a race that was all his? How did we not spot Takuma Sato? Did we get too dazzled with the potential of Marco Andretti or Dixon getting his second, which, again, it'll be a cruel thing if Dixon retires with only one victory at Indy, but those things stand out for sure. Let's close, Robin, on major takeaways leaving the 500. We're going right back to racing pretty quickly. Rossi, who's trying to climb up a bit in the championship, obviously a very bad day for him at a double points event. Not a bad one for Joseph Newgarden, finishing 5th, knowing that he's right there chasing Dixon for the title here. Dixie finishing 2nd, though. It wasn't the big Indy 500 win that he wanted, but if we're just thinking big picture leaving Indianapolis, boy, this championship is going to look a little bit different come the final results.
Yeah. Marshall, we write about it. We talk about it on your podcast and on our videos. This is the racetrack. You can't make a mistake. If you make a mistake, one mistake, it could screw your whole race. Scott Dixon never put a wheel wrong, was the fastest guy on the racetrack 3/4 of the race, became the 3rd leading lap leader in Indy 500 history today, by the way. Number 3 all time. His pit stops were phenomenal, the best of anybody's, including one for 6.2 seconds. He never made a mistake. He ran fast all day. He led the most laps, and he finished 2nd. So, lots of times the fastest car, I shouldn't say that. Maybe half the time the fastest car doesn't win the Indy 500. There's flukes that happen, and guys go off sequence and pits and things like that. But this was one of those days where the fastest guy at the very end was Takuma Sato, and he won the race. And I don't have a problem with the fastest guy at the end of the race winning it either. I just, you just hate to see somebody win it on fuel strategy or getting a lucky yellow. And I think what we saw at the end, Graham closing in on Scott, Dixon, and Sato, the 3 of them coming up on traffic with 5 laps to go, it was going to get pretty interesting. But to your point, I'm not sure anybody had anything for Sato because he handled traffic pretty well, and he even made David Letterman smile when it was all over.
Using poor word structure, Dixon dominated when it didn't matter and didn't when it did. So Sato did when it did, and he got number 2. So my English teachers are currently crying right now. Again, Robin, if there's one thing I love about a quality Indy 500 win, it's that we can say the person who is going home smelling like milk with a new ring on their finger and being celebrated throughout the racing world won it on determination and talent. They took it and earned it. This wasn't a fuel thing. This wasn't a lucky caution thing. Takuma Sato took the Indy 500 from Scott Dixon, and he is our new winner. I absolutely love it. Wow, wow, wow.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to take us home. That's what they say. That's TV talk. Did you know that, Marshall?
I've never heard. Who are you? What is this?
Well, this is kind of TV.
Okay.
All right. Well, it took us June, July. It took us 3 extra months to run the Indy 500, and it was probably worth the wait, even though the fans didn't get to come because it was a good race. Take away the Fontana fuel mileage thing when they took turns for leading, but it was a hell of a good race between some guys that were the fastest guys for the last 10 days, and that's how you want this thing to be decided. And like Marshall said, somehow Takuma Sato snatched this victory away from Scott Dixon, and he's got his picture on the Borg Warner Trophy for a second time, and he deserves it. And I can't say it was the most fun we ever had covering the Indy 500, but it was a fun race to watch. We thank you guys for reading Racer.com and